Yep, Shravan, hi, can you hear me?
Hey, hi Raghav.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Brilliant stuff. I'm doing really fine. Thank you so much for asking. And
Great.
Shravan, we're really delighted and we're really happy to have you. I had a chance to sort of check out who you are and what you've been up to as well.
Thank you very
Love
much.
the fact that you believe in the collective conscious as well. Huge believer on this side too. So
Yeah.
without further ado, folks, I know we've got a lot of people waiting for you. I know you're huge, got a huge fan following as well. So let me not keep you from them. Folks, today we've got Shravan from Byju, and he's going to be talking to us about what B2B folks and products can learn from the B2C side of things.
Got it.
So without further ado, Shravan, over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, guys. First of all, thank you very much for coming in. And it's an honor that I've been speaking here on the SaaS Insider conference. I think one of the core fundamental things that I've consciously talked about was that how the SaaS ecosystem can supplement any of the B2B or the B2C products. And this is one of the topics which is very close to my heart. Uh, I do see, can I see who are the people in the chat so that I can quickly check out who are there? Raghav, can you help me out on that? How do I see how many people are there in the chat?
I don't think you will be able to see it. I think it might have been hidden just for the
Got
moderators.
it. Got it.
But folks on the meeting, folks on the session with us, feel free to light up the chat box, and Shravan should be able to see
Yeah.
you from there.
Yeah. So let me put it this way. So starting off, I'll give you some very context. I've not created a very concrete presentation because this is something that's already very close to my heart. So the way that I look at least products in India, I'll give you a certain backdrop, right? The backdrop fundamentally is that India as an ecosystem didn't see products in general, like people didn't have the experience of building digital products. And in the last 2 decades, it has specifically changed across the entire ecosystem, how it's worked out and how things have been built, right? One of the things that we generally compare from the West equally is that we have taken processes from the West and tried to implement them in India, which clearly doesn't work because the ecosystem is very different, the demographic is very different. And one of the things that I keep talking about is that the first layer of products that were built, they were efficiency based products. How do you drive more efficiency, right? Now, if you look at from a B2C to a B2B perspective, one of the small things that were really different over there was in B2C, fortunately, with the nature of the business, you were already close to the consumer, right? But in B2B, you were speaking to a business. And more often than not, in the last 20 years, we have seen digital businesses coming up, right? So there were no processes. So most of the B2B products were primarily catered, how do you smoothen the entire business line? Like, let me put it this way. Around 15 years back, if you talk about a CRM, right? Nobody even knew what a CRM was, right? Or very few people in maybe in Bombay, Delhi, the metro cities, they knew what a CRM is. And a CRM as a customer resource management kind of a tool, right? It was built and features were built on top of it and different value propositions that were built on top of it, but primarily to lead, like how do you shorten the sales cycle, how do you effectively lead to more conversion, how do you effectively bring the client on board, which was all good and fine, right? But what happened in the last 7 years was crazy, right? Internet became cheaper and we saw more and more product adoption. As people saw more and more product adoption, this is more like a paradigm shift. You get used to using products. Like if you use Swiggy today, right? It's a verb. Why don't you Swiggy it, right? It's as simple as that. Now, in order to etch that product in the persona of the consumer, you had to bring customer delight, right? You had to put across personalization. You had to put across that what is the next thing that you're ordering, right? That didn't happen in the B2B ecosystem. That didn't happen, right? Now, with the advent of COVID, which is again a paradigm shift in how I look at things, remote productivity is becoming far more important, right? And that leads towards the segment that why B2B products also should move towards human-centered design. One of the reasons for that is that I go to my office, right, and specifically try to deliver an outcome for a B2B product or a B2B company, like I am working for Salesforce and I want to effectively drive that kind of an outcome, right? But as an employee, the tool is only an efficient way for me to effectively drive an outcome towards the industry or the business or something like that. But as an outcome for an employee, it doesn't do that. It doesn't work like that, right? Now, that is the reason if you see that there are a lot of startups which are coming into the space that the sales optimization process or the lead optimization process, they're gamifying those startups. The question here is why. The The question is not about whether I build a vertical on top of it, how do I change it? The question is, why do you want to do that, right? The reason is because it not only improves the efficiency of the salesperson, but also brings some sort of happiness quotient to it, that is enjoying the process. And if I really enjoy the process of using a product, more often than not, it will lead to internal retention, more better onboarding for the other customer who is coming as a business, right? And I will enjoy the process, and it leads to a certain level driven towards passion economy. Like as a salesperson, I like doing sales, right? But I don't like doing monotonous sales, right? So that is where specifically that kind of insertions are happening. So what I functionally feel is that India first started from an ecosystem having no products, moving towards efficiency-led products, and the next logical jump is by how do you design B2B products or SaaS ecosystem products, which are tailored towards human-centered design, right? Now, one of the very, very concurrent examples of it is that if you look at Salesforce, how it has branched out as a product, or Intercom as a product, which is again a B2B product, right? It's not a chat interface, it's a service layer. It's a service layer. How do you see that? Is that, let's assume I get 80% of queries in a certain way, and I as a salesperson have to tackle every query, right? But if I have that ability to tailor my queries in a certain way, which are more contextual to the user, and I get the context there, then my conversation automatically smoothens. Then the KPI that I have of doing more sales automatically smoothens, and I enjoy, and I say that I want to use Intercom more and more, because it helps me improve as a salesperson. So on the layer of efficiency, there's a layer of productivity. There's a layer of passion that you're getting built. And that is something that you learn very closely, very, very closely in B2C sector. So one of the things that I've always seen as a huge opportunity block, a very huge opportunity block, is if I can take certain mental models from the B2C space and apply it to the B2B space. One of the mental models that I'm very, very cognizant of is something called inversion. Inversion is, you already believe that if I improve the efficiency cycle of a salesperson or a marketing person and backtrack it, what steps I have to take backtrack in order to make that outcome actually come true. So let me give you one very fundamental, simple example of it. Like one of the mental models, that if I today tell you that there is a app which helps you book Mercedes and also helps you book a bus from moving from one place to another. And more often than not, both are equally paid. The same amount of money, you're paying for the same ride, right? What would you choose? 99% of the time, you'll choose the Mercedes, right? So value brings happiness, right? That's the first principle. The second first principle is that if I tell you that the trip has to happen 10 times, right? Out of the 10 times, all of the 10 times, you'll still choose the Mercedes, right? So happiness or joy brings repeat usage, right? And as a mental model, if I tie them together, it means value brings repeat usage, right? That's the core mental model that I'm trying to put across. Now apply the same human-centered mental model to a B2B product. Try to understand. So I get onboarded in a company where I am taking care of performance ads, and I'm trying to use a product such as Google, maybe Google Ads or something like that. And Google tells me that in your onboarding process, if you tell me what are your skills that you've worked on, or maybe I've had some integration with LinkedIn, right? Why don't I suggest you the kind of ads that you want to do and try to put across? And that is something that is coming from the skill of the employee himself, right? That is the one element. So I'm getting closer from a company basis to an employee basis. And there he tells, Google Ads probably tells you that you're not very conversant with Google Ads. Why don't you follow this checklist? This is how you effectively create a very standard library or a very standard method of doing Google Ads, and how this is the average conversion that you get. So not only while you are effectively trying to drive an outcome for the company and being as an employee, but you're learning as an employee, right? So you are effectively growing as an employee. And while you grow as an employee, it drives passion. And once there is passion, you would genuinely like your job. You would genuinely, and the whole element of productivity moves from work-life balance to work-life harmony. And this is the concept that Jeff Bezos generally speaks about all of the time. That I don't believe in work-life balance, I believe in work-life harmony. And this is something very natural as a transition that I see that's going to happen. And I have seen that happening at Byju myself, right? So Byju, as most of the people know, is an inside sales model, right? So what we functionally did is we tried to use certain layers of B2B products which were functionally gamified, and we internally built some sort of an algorithm in which I can effectively and tied those algorithms to something of a game centered design, which is more like a reward system, right? So every salesperson, based on the pitch he does, based on the transcript he has, we used to suggest him certain rewards, that this is what you're doing good, this is what you're doing bad. And what really happened was the CRM adoption and the CRM village. What I mean by that is that after every sales call, the sales guy has to put input that what happened. He was consciously inputting it, and we saw like an 80% rise in sales entries, that this is how my feedback was, and we saw drastic improvements in conversion. And this is just one method of improving productivity. What about how do you make it feel like a toy? Like let me put another example that I keep speaking across is, products are built in two functional ways, right? There's a service layer and there's a product layer, right? What is the difference between a service layer and a product layer? Service layer basically means any educational product is trying to tell you, give the same information to you, right? Whereas the product layer functionally is the experience of the layer. Like, let me give you an example of Duolingo. The core agenda of Duolingo is for you to learn language, right? But the experience of learning a language is like a game, right? Why can't the same thing happen to a CRM tool? Why can't the same thing happen to a SaaS tool, or maybe a customer support tool? So the entire process of delivering better customer support can be effectively gamified in such a way, using the principles of B2C, that they could be tied to functional KPIs. In B2C, it might be ordering food, but in B2B, or probably in a B2B product, on a customer support product, it can be, how do you effectively improve as a customer support executive? How do you do the better pitch, right? So that is something that I've very, very consciously believed is one functional way of driving towards what B2B products can learn from B2C products, right? That's the first part. The second part that I also believe that I want to really focus on is the consumption of data points per second. That is something that can improve. So one of the things that what I keep to talk about is personalization is how the future is going to be. Most of the B2B products are, since it's a layer on top of a company which is 5,000 employees or 6,000 employees, a very good example of that is Slack. Slack has a B2C component, but it also has a B2B component, right? So while it has a B2B component, there are engagement bots that you create, right? So if there's a channel that in which people are not responding, Slack pushes that channel across to you. And that's a concept that you're effectively driving from something like Instagram. Like if you go on Instagram and you click on a reaction, you see all of the other people start doing that, right? So if you build an engagement bot into as dominant a service, or as, I don't really think that customer success, sales, marketing are really dominant processes. But then again, from people's perspective, I would say that it's a dominant process. And I put an engagement bot over there and effectively try to tell them that, oh, wow, your copy is not right, or it is not on the same lines in the last. And then people start noticing that, right? So that is again a concept of basically leveraging a data point, which is not at a company layer, but at a performance layer, right? And that is also something, and that is something that has been hugely used in products like TikTok, where you're effectively using those layers to drive personalization and stuff like that, right? So these are the two core data points that I've always thought of that can be very, very simple to put across and radicalize across, right? So that is something that I would definitely want to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you so much for all of that information that you've condensed into 10-15 minutes as much as you can. That's definitely a lot to digest. I've got to be real with you, Shravan.
Yeah.
So on the chat, we've got it lighting up. We've got one question from Snehal Gokali.
Yeah.
So his question is, how do you consider company policy in a B2B product when you approach from an employee's mindset of how the product will be used? And he's added on another line saying, I mean, employees may end up in action, which is not desirable as per company policy. So, and that's his question.
Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting question, right? How do you effectively put across the security policy? Like, let me put it this way. Slack started off as a product, which is something like a B2C experience, right? Then you move towards a company level structure, and then you move towards an enterprise grade structure, which is where security also becomes really, really important, right? Now, What you effectively do over there is, again, leveraging the B2C outcomes, is that how do you effectively build features which are easily discoverable in the myriad of features that is typically used in a B2B platform. One of the distinguishing things in a B2B versus a B2C platform is that a B2B platform or B2B products are made in such a way that they are a consortium of services provided to a particular entity. And that is how you design that. Why would you want to use the CRM? You would not just use Salesforce only for its onboarding process. You would effectively use Salesforce for the better conversion funnel, better insights, better analytics, better multiple things, right? Now, if there is a certain company policy, it is about the discovery. Like one of the things that we leveraged as a B2C concept in using the CRM that we use is Lead Squared, which is basically an Indian startup which recently got funded, right? And it's a bootstrap startup, right? We used a layer of what I would say an FTUE, a first time user experience, right? And what we tried to put across is that use something like a B2C product like WhatFix, right, or Iridice, and put that layer on top of Salesforce. Lead Squared. And what we saw is that people automatically started understanding that there are certain areas they can't access as a rule, right? There are certain areas where they should access and try to keep an eye on vigilantly every day, right? And that really drove a contextual engagement, which is needed in a B2C product, right? One of the big problems in India, both in the B2B and B2C spaces, we define time spent on the application or probably clicks on the application as relevant engagement, but it's just hypothetical clicks, right, that you're doing. If you spend 50 minutes on the Flipkart app just on the sign up page, doesn't really mean that you're an engaged user, right? Doesn't really mean. So how do you drive contextual engagement and contextual discovery within the process of a B2B product is something that we have experimented very heavily with Byju, because we are very, very heavily reliant on an inside sales model, right? We have a large sales team. I'm sure you must have heard of it. We have around 10,000 plus salespeople all across the country, right? And those are very important to us because the sales cycle is of 14 days, right? And it is very difficult to operationally manage that, right? So coming from onboarding to basically assisting the employee to effectively, or the salesperson to effectively reach his sales goals, then driving more productivity, giving him rewards contextually that you've achieved your sales goals, right? And then moving towards an ecosystem where all of these learnings come back to the B2B product, and next time it automatically improves when a sales guy is onboarded, right? That we have seen what works, what doesn't. Like it's a concept that I feel that Tesla has very avidly imbibed, that your car is sitting at a particular place, but it's still learning from the network of other cars across, right? So the same way, if you put layers of contextual engagement in a B2B product, which is very, 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 very present in all of the B2C products. One of the ways is how you look at Swiggy. Whenever you look at a restaurant, it not only tells you the dish, but also tells you the relevant restaurant, also tells you the top rated restaurant, right? Now, these are the three thoughts in the minds of the consumer, that am I ordering it from the right place? Am I ordering it from the best place, right? But the same thought is not really applicable in the B2B ecosystem, right? And that is something that is effectively being really, really. I just feel that this is the next step. This is the growth paradigm where you would see $100 billion company, and Freshworks is just a recent example of it. They just raised, did a phenomenal IPO, right? And I think they're just scratching the surface, because these two ecosystems are very strongly well knit. Right? The same user is using a B2C application where he feels very comfortable with, because it's his personal use case. How do you drive personal discovery in a professional use case, right? And those kind of things are, because in the end, it's the same user. He's the same guy who's ordering food from a different app and using a different platform to drive money for his family, right? So if you look at it from the viewpoint of a business entity and then go one layer deeper, you're still effectively targeting the same consumer psychographic of a user who uses the same different type of products and believes that the same experience should be parallelized, right? What I mean by that is that if you go with your friends and go in a great car, you would expect that your company ride should be similar to that, right? You would not believe that I should go in a bus in a company, and whereas my friends are in a Mercedes, that's your ideal choice, right? And if you kind of build those experiences in the form of a user journey, you would see that a sales guy gets up, orders coffee for himself, checks out his CRM, very happy to see great conversions over there, then sees, okay, where am I missing, right? Then it's a data point that's personalized to him. He tries to work on that data point, believes that, oh, wow, I worked on my problems today, I feel better, gets the feedback on that, on top of it, completes his day, is very happy about it, that fair enough, I knew where I'm lacking. There's a growth structure that's already built in the product itself, and my manager has to come back and say that you're not doing well here. And you, so I would rather be assisted by a product which gives me personalized insights like Intercom or maybe like Salesforce, then effectively talk to my manager who can give me an insight which feels like that probably I'm not doing well, right? So that is something that I feel that it is a very seamless connect. Snehal, I hope I've answered that question. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Shravan. And as you kept explaining it, the one thought that ran in my head was I put two and two together. I thought AI collective conscious, are we going to be talking about Skynet sometime soon, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, that effectively looks like where things are heading.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah, see, collective conscience comes from, I know it's just off the topic, but I'll just quickly speak probably 2 minutes about it. And it has very, very strong paradigm shifts on how products are built. See, any layer on which a product is built is measured in material KPIs, right? Which is like engagement, retention, revenue, whatever you want to call it, right? But collective conscience as a concept plays on one layer deeper, right? Which is the layer of trust, right? So majority of business deals or majority of the products which are used in the ecosystem and finally build a strong top of mind are because they have a layer of trust, right? Like it is something like WhatsApp. I can easily use WhatsApp. So I know for a fact that somehow in my mind, it's built that thought that, okay, if my friend is, even if he's in the US, he's just a WhatsApp away, right? So that's a layer of trust that has been built. Now, collective conscience works on the same level, that if you give back to the ecosystem without any material rewards, like if I'm talking to you right now to you, Raghav, and we had a particular fee structure assigned to it, like $500, you would have probably forgotten about this particular conversation after 30 minutes because I got my $500 and you said, oh, fair enough, I got my insights. But now if we are both helping the ecosystem grow and try to put across some insights which you want to learn from Shravan and concurrently I want to learn from you, right? It builds a layer of faith and trust that there's a friendship going on. And probably tomorrow, if you feel that there's a B2B product who needs some sort of a B2C kind of a structure, and you would say, Shravan is the right guy. Why don't I just connect to him? That's where collective conscience works. It builds network effects very deeply, very deeply. So that mindset, I think, is going to be very, very deep in how we design products. And most PMs typically feel products are tech-based, product are better design. But I have concurrently told this in many of my sessions that there are multiple products which had the best features who are sitting in the graveyards of Silicon Valley. Nobody never used them. The only whole and sole reason people use products is that they don't buy products. They buy better versions of themselves in some way, right? Be it a B2B product, be it a B2C product, it's effectively adding a quotient of happiness or comfort in their lives, right? And if that element is not concurrently reduced, you build anything, it's not going to work. Right? The same reason, like I'll give you a very simple example. The conference that you're doing and people are coming here to listen to me is probably because of the fact that you're doing a great job and they want to understand a certain concept, right? They want to understand apply those insights. And tomorrow, the very same people would probably put across a note to SaaS Insider and say that, hey, if you want to get a guy from a network who wants to build some sort of a great SaaS product, why don't you just reach out to Raghav or maybe reach out to Chameli, right? That is how collective conscience works. I see there's one question from Chameli, which is there in the chat. Would love to answer that, but just read it for the audience.
For sure, yeah, definitely. So Chameli from our own SaaS Insider, her question is, has COVID accelerated the shift of this mindset about combining and bringing in B2C and B2B together?
Got it. So I think pretty much that is yes. The reason for that is twofold. Because of COVID, since the world has moved towards a digital first economy, which is already happening, but it kind of accelerated that change rapidly. One of the things that is happening is that the consumption, the quantity of information consumed by an individual is growing rapidly, but not the quality of information, right? What is relevant and what is not relevant, right? Now, for somebody to define relevance as an individual, it is a personal thought. That relevance means if I get more time to spend with my family, so what I would do is I'll probably use a task management tool, right, which helps me do that. So but it is very difficult to think of the same way in a product which is kind of working at a layer of 1,000 employees, right? Like, how you would, a salesperson would not think of that, okay, should Salesforce add a feature which will help me drive better conversions, right? Well, he would probably think it's just how it is, right? And I should optimize on my personal things which are under my control, right? Now this is a mindset that we want to change. This is a mindset that has to change, because it would lead to a very strong fatigue, a remote fatigue, which is already happening. You see a lot of people, Apple innovating a lot on productivity features, even Android working a lot on productivity features, right? And this is primarily because the primary mode of consumption of information are smartphones, applications, and simultaneously those applications can be B2B, B2C, right? So not only productivity in your personal life, but in your professional lives and as well as your business lives, right? It has to change, right? In order to become that work-life harmony balancism. So you would see a lot of startups coming up in that particular space, that how do you effectively take a use case which was primarily there, maybe like a ticketing engine, and how do you make it better? How do we make it better? And the reason to make it better is because not only just to help the business which is effectively using your service, but also help the stakeholders which are effectively innovating faster, right? The people who are within the company. So yes, that mindset is changing, but I still feel that there are certain ecosystems which are poised for it, and India is a very good ecosystem, because somehow in the Southeast Asian economy, India is the crown jewel where most of the funding is happening. Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other Southeast Asia, these are ecosystems which are like 3-4 years behind, right? So we as product leaders have to take that initiative specifically and drive those changes. Like what I am trying to do at Byju, even though it's an educational front, I'm trying to think about the lives of the salespeople who effectively buy us more revenue, right? And if I make them happy as a byproduct, my company grows, my product grows, right? So it's something that's a no-brainer for me. Yeah. So Chameli, answering your question, that is how it's happening. Yeah.
All right, and I think that kind of winds up all the questions we have for today as well, Shravan. So yeah, Chaveli's just dropped it with a thank you note. So with that said, Shravan, is there anything else that you'd like to add as a final footnote? Maybe like throw down a punch dialogue for us.
Yeah. So the only thing that I would want to say is, whether it's any product, right? The first thing that you have to notice is who's using the product, right? That's the most key. And if you can bring an element of change in the person who's using the product, be it B2B, be it B2C, it's poised to, then success becomes very structured. Any non-deterministic problem, if you think at first principle is something that doesn't change with time, right? So if the first principle stays relevant, value stays relevant. And if value stays relevant, innovation stays relevant. So stay curious, guys, and always think from the point of, if you are blocked anywhere in your life where you feel you cannot build better products, stop everything. Just talk to your user, be it an internal employee, be it an external employee, be it a business. Just talk to them and you'll get most of the solutions. Yeah.
Great stuff, Shravan. We've got a lot of